وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً أَنْ يَفْقَهُوهُ وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا وَإِنْ تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى فَلَنْ يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. Surah-Al-Kahfi, Surah 18, Ayat 57. This verse is so difficult. Let's see. I'll try to help you understand this. There are complexities left, right, and center. Let's proceed one by one. Wa and man, who. Al-lamu is in the af'alu pattern, is in the comparative pattern, is more wrong. Min, than. Man, who. And who is more wrong than someone who. So this is the translation till this part. Dhukkira, this is the passive, was reminded bi ayati of the verses Rabbihi of his Lord. Fa a'rada, again a difficult word. Fa, but then a'rada, he turned away from and ignored them. So there are two meanings, both has to be captured to fully understand what a'rada means. A'rada means, so to turn away and to ignore. So both the nuances put together sort of gives the meaning of a'rada. But then he turned away from and ignored them. Wa nasiya, and forgot. Basically, and he forgot. So the same who that is referencing and forgot. Ma is what? Qaddamat is the verb and yadahu is the subject. So his two hands, what his two hands, the subject, qaddamat, have already repeatedly sent forth. So this is talking about the sinners, the unrepentant sinners, right? The criminals. So why? So what they have sent forth, I'll explain this part. First is sent forth. So to send forward, qaddamat, to send forward. To send forward means, so their misdeeds. To send forward means now they will be accountable for the misdeeds in the hereafter, on the day of judgment. That is what is being meant. So they have already sent forth. They have sent forth. What is two hands? What is own two hands? Own is for emphasis. What is own two hands have sent forth. Where is the word already coming from? And similarly, where is the word repeatedly coming from? If you notice the pattern, first the repeatedly part. Qaddamat, qaddamat, fa'ala pattern. Fa'alat pattern, right? So, I mean, I did not make a mistake. That's masculine and feminine. Fa'ala and fa'ala. Qaddama, qaddamat. Repeatedly. So, whenever this pattern, there's a shadda on the second letter. So, that indicates a repetition. They have not done it just once. They have not sinned or committed crime against the fellow human beings just once. They have done so repeatedly. And already, it's in the past. They've already done so. Now what? Now it's too late for them. So already, so you know the word qad, which means already. So qad is actually derived from qaddama. So this is the same. It's a functional word. You cannot say it's directly derived, but that's how it's derived, basically indirectly. You can say that. But if you read this part now, it fits together. And who is more wrong than someone who was reminded of the verses of his Lord, but then he turned from and ignored them and forgot what his own two hands have already repeatedly sent forth. The next part, if this part was tricky, the next part is even more tricky. It's more difficult, but we will try to break it down into manageable parts and help you understand. I'll try to do that. Inna, indeed we, inna and na, indeed we, ja'alna, ja'al is a flexible word. You should have become accustomed to that by now. So we have made, we have placed. Indeed we have placed. The we is actually twice, but it need not be repeated. And I've explained that aspect as well. Indeed, we have placed. In fact, here, to repeat would be wrong. There is no emphasis over here. If you are forgetting that part, you need to see one of my previous lectures when the first occurrence of this construct appeared. Inna ja'alna, and indeed we have placed ala qulubihim, over their hearts, akinnatan, a covering. So akinnatan, akinna means to cover, to conceal, to hide, something like that. So the most suitable word in this context is a covering. And the nasab gets translated first. Indeed, and there is an emphasis obviously, but the emphasis has already been captured once by the use of the word indeed. The reversal of the word order, right? Indeed, we have placed a covering over their hearts. That would be the normal construct in the English language. Now, an is tricky over here because normally we translate an as that. But here we translate as lest that. Lest, sort of negative sense, not that, or for the fear that, but lest is required over here, and you will understand why otherwise. So un can be translated that or can be translated less that, depending on the context. And if we don't use lest over here, the meaning doesn't make any sense. I mean the verse doesn't make any sense. Why have you placed a covering over their hearts? Okay, I mean this is now a discussion about their past. They are in front of the Lord on the day of judgment. So their past on the earth is what is being discussed over here. Yafqahu, yafqahuhu. Less that they deeply understand it. Yafqahu is plural, so they understand. Who is attached to noun? They understand it. They deeply understand it. What? The verses of his Lord. So if you don't want to understand the verses of your Lord, and you've repeatedly rejected that and committed sins and crimes repeatedly, then eventually what Allah does is, okay, you let Allah lets you do whatever you want on the earth. This life is limited, and soon you will get to know. So that is the context, that the backdrop, that is what is we need to understand. Indeed, we have placed a covering over their hearts, lest that they deeply understand it. Now, faqaha, fiqh, to understand. It's not just to understand. Fahm is to understand. Fiqh is to deeply understand, deep understanding, not just understanding. That's fahm. Fiqh is deep understanding. So that is what is mentioned. Less that they deep. Superficially, everyone can understand. But what is the implication? People read the Quran to find out mistakes. I'm talking about the critics and the non-Muslims especially. Even some Muslims, they don't understand that. So superficial, everyone can understand. But when you ponder and deeply try to understand, go into a deep reflection mode, that's what it benefits you. Less that they deeply understand. So Allah says, we have covered their hearts. I don't want them to understand. So some people have translated that they do not understand. Where do you get the word no from? There is no negation. So the best way to translate this part is less that, for the word un that appears at the beginning of this phrase. Less, we don't want to. So less that they deeply understand it. The next part is even more tricky, even more difficult. Okay, first I'll give you the translation, the representative translation, what the scholars or the translators have translated this part of the verse as, and then I'll highlight why this part is so wrong. Wafi, and what they have translated, and in adhanihim, their ears, wakran is deafness, and in their ears is deafness. It seems all right when you hear it in the English language, but that is not meant over here. The construct is so deep. You cannot just superficially dilute the meaning to that extent. The beauty is lost, the meaning is lost as well. And in their ears is deafness. No, that is not what it says. First, what is Vakran doing in the Nasab status over here? We need to understand that. It's exactly for the same reason why Akinatan is in the Nasab status. So where is the verb? This is the object. Where is the verb? The verb is Ja'alna. If you understand that, so we have placed a covering over their hearts, less than they deeply understand, and we have placed something else, and the word we have placed is not required to be repeated. Just as in English we don't repeat, so in the Arabic we don't need to repeat it. But that is impacting this part of the sentence as well, is clear from the word waqran, because it is in the nasab status. I hope I was able to clarify this part. And so we have also placed what we have placed in addition to the covering over the hearts, and we have placed Okay, and we have placed Wakaran. We have placed is from the Jalna part, and we have placed Wakaran. What is Wakaran? In their ears is fine, but what is Wakaran? This is so difficult. Let me try my best to help you understand this part. It's a transcendental reality. So Wakaran is a transcendental reality. First, we have to understand that. What exactly is it is difficult for us to fully comprehend. Okay, one is that already the deep understanding which they have prevented. Even more than that, even with fiqh, it's probably not possible to penetrate the entire reality, the whole reality of what is Wakaran. So it's a transcendental reality which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done upon them. Let's understand this. Let's appreciate this. Then we'll try to understand. So let's say Adhanim is their ears. That part is the easy part, their ears. So we have placed Wakaran over the ears. Wakaran is a transcendent reality. You can say it is something like a heavy load. So if you place a heavy load, sometimes there is earwax in your ears, right? And when the earwax fills, sometimes you find it difficult in hearing and it's not very clear. And if the earwax accumulates too much, and if you were if you were to jam the cavity of the ears, what will happen? You will translate something like Allah has placed a heavy load, but that load is not physical, it's a transcendental reality, a metaphysical reality, and a transcendental heavy load in the sense in the cavity. Okay, how is this part? So, okay, let me explain. In the cavity of the ears, where is the word cavity coming from? So, another meaning is hollow. So, that has to be understood as well. Another meaning of Wakaran is cavity. So that Wakaran, since it is used in the sentence, not just as the object, but also in the, what should I say, in the jar majroor part, wafi adhanihim, that has an impact. It's very difficult, I told you. And a transcendental heavy load in the cavity of the ears. So the cavity comes from Wakaran as well, just as heavy load comes from Wakaran as well, just as it being a transcendental reality comes from Wakaran as well. Another meaning is, for Wakaran is hollow. So Allah uses just one word Wakaran to explain, to indicate everything. But we are finding just struggling, literally just struggling to express it in a similar manner. But all of these connotations are implied, so we have to have those additional words for you to appreciate, for us to appreciate what is the full connotation of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Wakaran also means hollow. So just as a heavy load can block your ears and hence cause deafness. Deafness is nowhere mentioned over here, by the way. And in their ears is a deafness. That's a rubbish translation, basically. That's not done. That's not acceptable. So Wakaran hollow. So just as your hearing becomes limited, restricted, restrained by heavy load, can you imagine, can you think through how would a hollow impact your ability to hear? What happens in empty space? What happens in vacuum? Can sound travel? No. So even instead of and both the meanings are actually, so all of these meanings are actually coming from the word Wakaran. That is the interesting part. So even if we were to make it hollow, vacuum, and we have placed a hollow, and Wakaran also means hollow. In the hollow of the ears, we have placed a hollow so that there's no sound waves which can travel. The energy, the waves cannot travel. In the hollow of the ears, causing deafness. So deafness, which so easily if they've translated, is the intended, it can be a derived meaning at best. And all of these because of what we have explained. And all of these are coming from the root word dictionary meanings, the lexicon is highlighting all of these meanings, and we are struggling because Wakaran, to appreciate the full connotation, I need to give you all these details, and this was my best ability. Sometimes there is a play of words in the Arabic language. I should not say it's a play of words. It's a way the words have been used to construct the language, to construct the verse. So I'm actually happy because this part, and we have placed a hollow in the hollow of the ears. So some sort of play of words is coming through, and it's interesting, and it's actually implied But so much more is implied. That's what I'm trying to suggest to you. And a transcendental heavy, and we have also placed a transcendental heavy load or hollow in the cavity or hollow of the ears, causing deafness. You can't translate this part. And in their ears is deafness. No, not allowed. Okay, so the last part is also very difficult. If you thought that the difficulties are over by now, no, wait for this part. What in and if. Tad'u. So nadawa and da'awa, we have already come across in verse number 52. Both we translated as call and to call, and we explained that why call is deficient. So I explained it through other words, through brackets, right? That's what we did, and did justice to the usage of the two separate Arabic words over there. This is the root word is da'wa, so the second word. But there we, if you remember, there we translated as invoke. Invoke. Why are we translating here as call? I should have actually inserted within call invite. And if we were to call them in the sense of invite them, I don't know now how do I edit this anyway, but you know, because you're hearing this, right? So here it is invite. Now you would say, hey, what's happening over here? Da'wa, you translate as invoke, you translate as invite, you do whatever you want to do. No, I'm not doing whatever I want to do. When da'wa, the word comes along with the preposition ila, which it appears over here, it means to invite. So to call in the sense to invite. And when it is in reference to God, then it means to invoke. These are dictionary meanings. I'm not trying to fool you. You can go and check in the dictionary, the lexicon. Okay. So since the word ilah appears over, it's not invoked. Since it's not in reference to God, I mean that God, there it was a reference to false gods. Whether it is a reference to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God in the sense of false gods, it's still invoke. But here, since the preposition ilah comes, then it means invite. And if we were to call them, that is invite them, ila al-huda, to guidance, falan tahtadu idhan abadan. How can you mess up with this part of the translation? Just as the translators or the scholars have translated it as. You can't possibly do that. They have translated it as something like, and they will never be guided. And they will never be guided. They will never be guided. That is passive. The construct is not passive. Wrong. And they will never be guided is wrong. It's not. I'm not saying it's simplistic. It's simplistic, but it's wrong. Had it been simplistic and correct, that would have been a different issue altogether. Falan yahtadu idhan abadan does not, cannot mean from the construct, from the Arabic language itself. And I mean, then they will never be guided. No, it doesn't mean that. We'll come to what it means. Fa is then, which is okay. Idhan is then as well. Right? So even is then in the true sense. So when then, that sort of thing. Here it's the construct is obviously if then. So that if then is being captured through in and fa. Wa in tad'uhum ila al-huda fa lan. So in and fa. And this isn't that when then, in the sense there is an emphasis over here. Lan also can mean emphasis. Lan can mean no or never. So we have used the word never. It's already emphasized. It can mean emphasized. We have done that. So even in that sense, you cannot say then. You can say possibly in that case, but it will be too wordy. But the best way to capture, which I thought was even then. So that emphasis also cap even then. Now, yahtadu is not passive. They will never be guided. No. This is in the active. This is the present form, present verb, present tense verb, present future, present verb. That's fine. But it's in the active. So it cannot be, they will never be guided. So it's verbal root, verbal form 8. So when that happens, there is a reflexive nature to it. So they themselves, I think I should have added themselves. You see the difficulty. I tried my best to capture, but even then, one or two occurrences, I still feel that there is scope of improvement on what you can see on the screen. But you know, as long as you know and understand, that's okay. Even then, they themselves will never be committed to guidance. I'll explain that. Abadan is ever. So never ever. You getting it? Lan, abadan, never ever. خالدين فيها أبدا. That same thing, abadan, ever. So never ever. Even then, they themselves will never. And one more thing, yahtadu. Why have I done it? Be committed to guidance. That is because it is uh, how to explain. So, in addition to the reflexive nature, it also has an emphatic nature. It's in the active voice. It's not in the passive voice. To be guided is passive. So to be committed to guidance is active. It is active and hence it is correct. It is preserving the emphasis which is coming from the verbal form 8, and in addition to that, it is what else? I think those two. So passive active and the emphasis. So emphasis, verbal form 8, and the reflexive nature, and they themselves will never ever be committed to guidance. This then is sort of in the English language what best I could. This is far superior than any existing translation. There's no doubt about that. But is it perfect? Far from it. Only the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect. The Arabic text that you can see on the screen, the words of the Quran, not the English. But the understanding, at least, if you understand, understanding per se will be complete. And if you add those within brackets, but you already know that, it's just that I missed that. And if you were to call, that is invite them to guidance, even then, so, and it's like, and even if you were to call them to guidance, it will not benefit them. Even then, they themselves will never ever be committed to guidance. So I hope that I'll be able to insert those two brackets when I read the English translation one last time, as we always do. So let's do that. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ إِنَّ جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً أَنْ يَفْقَهُوهُ وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا وَإِنْ تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى فَلَنْ يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. And who is more wrong than someone who was reminded of the verses of his Lord, but then he turned away from and ignored them, and forgot what his own two hands have already repeatedly sent forth. Indeed, we have placed a covering over their hearts, lest that they deeply understand it, and a transcendental heavy load or hollow in the cavity or hollow of the ears, causing deafness. And if you were to call them to guidance, even then, and if you were to call, that is, invite them to guidance, even then they themselves will never ever be committed to guidance.